This is another special edition of PFTPM. We are doing our post-draft interview series with general managers throughout the NFL. We're going to not that broadly, expand the definition for the purposes of this interview. This isn't the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys, but the chief operating officer, executive vice president, director of player personnel. He is Stephen Jones. Stephen, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, great being on, Mike. Look forward to our visit.
Well, you know what? I thought of something just before we started. I praise you and your father, Jerry, all the time because as owners go, you got your sleeves rolled up and you're directly involved and you don't act like you aren't. I feel like a lot of the other owners like to have a buffer so they can say they're not involved, but they really are. They just say they're not. They say that the people they hire to run the team, and they don't do anything. And I rarely believe that. But you don't have to do that with the Cowboys because the owners are not bashful about saying we are in charge and that's the way we like it.
It's something obviously we have a great passion for. I mean, Jerry got in this over 30 years ago, and it was to be involved. He said it from the day he walked in the door. He loved the game. He played college football. It was his dream to get his hands on an NFL team, and he made no bones about it when he walked in the door. I think the famous quote, everything from socks to jocks, I'm going to be in the middle of. And certainly I just graduated from school about 3 or 4 years earlier and played football at Arkansas as well. And I certainly welcome that opportunity to be very involved in all of it as well. So you're right. We don't mince words about it. We don't point fingers at the end of the day. How we do, whether it's the business of football or whether it's football on the field, we feel like, at the end of the day, it comes back to our family in terms of whether we have success or not. Obviously, we've had some big successes in business, but as of late, it certainly pains us that we're not having more success on the field. We won the 3 Super Bowls when we first walked in the door. And unfortunately, it's, been too long since we've been able to bring another championship back to Dallas. And it's something that we think about all the time. And certainly we have to improve. Our fans deserve better. And hopefully we took another step, over the last 3 days of the draft that we, took a big step in improving our team and putting players around Dak Prescott and that offense, and certainly working with Dan and the defense and with Mike McCarthy in terms of, getting the type of players that we want to have in our building that can bring us a championship.
I know there's been plenty of talk coming both from Jerry and from you about the status of the team, where the team is, where it's going to be when the season gets here. But where do you personally feel things are in relation to where it left off at the end of the 2021 season?
Well, we certainly feel good about it. I know everybody wants to point to not having Amari Cooper, which Amari was a great player, but, people don't want to hear it, but you do have to make some decisions. You see receivers around the league that are moving teams. And, I think, certain teams have to make that call in terms of, how much you want to have, tied up in a particular player receiver, if you will. But certainly there's been some, we don't have Amari. We ended up making a tough decision on Randy Gregory. But overall, we feel like we really have had a good off season, and certainly, really amping up and finding some players to help in particular with those 2 losses. Obviously, we've got Sam Williams, who was a very successful defensive end for Ole Miss in the SEC, had double-digit sacks. And then certainly really like Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama in terms of coming in here to help CD and Michael Gallup. But I do think this is going to allow, CD to really spread his wings even more. And I think turn into, one of the top receivers in this league with the opportunities that he's going to get.
It is a strange time in the NFL at the receiver position because there are so many great ones coming into the draft every year, but there are plenty of great ones in the NFL that are attracting gigantic contracts. And if a team doesn't want to pay a guy a big contract, there's another team that'll trade for him and give him that contract. I can't remember a time like this where we've had one position, Stephen, that was so plentiful every year in the draft, but it's going haywire at the top of the market with the receivers that are getting paid near and above 25, 28, $30 million now.
Yeah. Well, I just think, some of that too is I think, part of the overall makeup of your team. I mean, obviously some of these teams that are paying quarterbacks big money, we certainly fit in that category with Dak. You do have to make some tougher decisions. And when you do have, some top quarterbacks that can get the ball to people, you feel better maybe about, having the youth in there that can step up and make those plays. So it's been really interesting to watch in terms of, seeing some of these great receivers, that have moved teams, and obviously, some other names that are floating around out there that might be available for another team. You just don't know, but it is an interesting time, and agree with you. I think these receivers are more plentiful than ever coming out of these colleges. They're, playing these. That's the college game now, is to throw it around, and you are able to see, where these guys can come in and play immediately, because they have been in, in a lot of cases, sophisticated offenses that throw the ball around and give them the opportunity to show personnel people in our league that it would translate to our field in the NFL.
And the reality too, when you draft a receiver who becomes great, like a CD Lamb, the clock ticks on how long you have him until he's in a position where he wants to be paid like some of these other guys. How much planning have you engaged in for the reality that after this coming season, you're going to have a young receiver in CD Lamb who is quite possibly jostling to get a big contract like some of the other ones that we've seen the receivers get?
Well, I think you're always in that planning mode. I mean, I've talked to a lot of our guys around here, and we've got we look, in detail at our salary cap situation up to 3 years out, and always keep that running number there to look at to see, what we're going to be looking at. I think we were in, obviously rare times in terms of the pandemic and what that did to the salary cap in terms of, not having fans in the stands, and obviously our players are our partners, and, the salary cap felt that as well. So unlike the usual bumps that you have where the cap just keeps growing, obviously we hit a time where it was, actually went down and then has made its way back up, but not to where it would have been had you not, faced the pandemic. Now, I do think our business is in a great place and a great place to grow. And I think consequently, that's why you're seeing some of these big numbers with these receivers. Is I think everybody's projecting out that the cap is going to grow and business is going to be good in the NFL.
Yeah, right now we're at $208.2 million. It was a $25 million or so jump post-pandemic, but there's still some pandemic losses baked into it. Where do you think the cap is going to go over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I just think it'll probably get back in that mode again where it's growing in that, 10% type, 5 to 10% type range. And, barring something unforeseen, that you should have, some growth as we move forward. There's still a few things that have to be corrected from the pandemic. Just as you mentioned, they were baked into this year's number. There'll be some more of that baked in next year. And then hopefully at that point, we're caught up and we'll be going from there. But, right now it's too early to, for us to project. We can do them internally, but it's probably not the right thing to do for me to guess or estimate where I think that cap's going to be publicly next year.
The fans get caught up in that fantasy football aspect, the money that flies around in free agency. They look at what the Cowboys did this year in free agency and they say, why wasn't more done? Why do you think there hasn't been more aggressive efforts in recent years by the Cowboys to go out and get free agents with big contracts? I know instead you've been giving out big contracts to some of your own guys that you drafted and developed, but why not the push to spend the money on the open market to the guys who become available every March?
Well, we just feel like if you have, we feel like our players are the better players out there, then that's who we'd like to spend on. Them. There's no surprises, and feel like, if you can grow your get your homegrown players, we feel like that's where we've been the most successful. Now, the flip side of that is where's the Super Bowl to show for it? But at the same time, some of the players that we've made a trade for Amari and kept Amari around here for 3 or 4 years. We're not opposed to it, but it does have to, has to be the right player, for us to either go out and make a trade or pay that player in free agency. I'm a big advocate that, free agency is an inflated situation in terms of going out to get these players. Now, trading for them, a lot of times you can get into a contract that's more affordable or not as much. But certainly when you're in a bidding war out there, which we certainly, had that situation with the Randy Gregory where we were trying to keep him. Obviously, other teams were wanting him, and the number kept going up. We ultimately made a tough decision. But we be the first to say it, that, we like to really focus on the draft, have successful drafts, and hopefully that gives you your own homegrown players that you can pay. This year was a little different for us in that we, because of the pandemic, it was tough to project how long it was going to last and, what effects it would have on the salary cap. So we ended up having more free agents than, we normally would like to have because of the unknown. But certainly we feel like we're going to get back in the mix of getting some of these players, these young players that we want to keep around here. Get ahead of it, get them signed, so you don't have, that type of free agency risk that we had this year.
Your team had a better season in 2021 than a lot of the outsiders would have predicted, overachieved, got to the playoffs, won the division a year after you didn't. When do you get a good feeling as to what the team is really going to be in a given year? At what point does that crystallize for you that we're going to be pretty good, or we're going to struggle a little bit this year, whatever the case may be?
I think in general, when you have a quarterback like Dak, I know the year before, we did struggle in the pandemic, but the injuries, including a major injury to our quarterback Dak, really hurt us. And it's tough to overcome that. Teams do it. We weren't able to overcome the numbers of injuries we had, not only to Dak, but the offensive line. That side of the ball was a difficult year, and consequently, we ended up struggling and not having the type of team that we felt like, that we normally would have had without the injury situation. But, I think why we, have this foundation in place, starting with Dak Prescott, our view is every year we have an opportunity to go win it and go bring a championship back to Dallas. And certainly we feel really good about this team, feel even better about it after the draft. And I feel like, love our coaching staff. Obviously, Dan Quinn came in here and really turned the defense around in quick order. I think it's only going to get better as people are, as our players are understanding what Dan wants out of them. I mean, I think they had a great feel for it last year, but I still think, they will improve. And then, of course, we made some picks on the defensive side of the ball that should help us. And, we have some young players that are going to get to step up now. I've mentioned Dorrance Armstrong should get an opportunity. Obviously, Sam Williams to, step up and fill that void where Randy, where we had to make a tough call and lose Randy there. Hopefully there's some good young players that are ready to step up and have a chance to really make us better there.
Do you pick up extra confidence for your team's expectations and prospects this year when you look at the conference as a whole and how many great players have made the move from the NFC to the AFC to the point where the AFC seems really top heavy and the NFC to many respects seems wide open?
Well, I just think, you can only control your team. And certainly I know a lot of people want to be critical of the NFC East and, say that it's not very competitive, but those are, the three other organizations in the East are all very strong. They're big markets. They do have, good ownership, good coaches, and, it's a matter of time before it, gets back to being competitive again. But we feel, we can only control what we can control, and we're going to continue to work to make our team better. The off season's a long one. We're not through with, you're usually never through with player acquisition. It goes on throughout the year, and we'll continue to look for ways to make our team better. But do feel good about the core and the foundation of our team right now.
Fans, I think, always want to have big name, exciting draft picks. And as offensive linemen go, once you get past the first few that get talked about so much before the draft and people feel like they know who they are, fans just kind of shrug when a team takes like a mid to late first round offensive lineman. What should Cowboys fans know? Why should they be excited about your first round pick, offensive lineman Tyler Smith?
Well, I just think his upside is tremendous. He played at a smaller school there at Tulsa. Only played in 18 games at Tulsa, and but just feel like his skill sets really lend to him, really having an opportunity, I think, to be a top left tackle at some point. Obviously, we got one of the best in the business for him to learn from in Tyron Smith. Certainly, Tyler Smith will get an opportunity to hit the field at some other spots as well. He'll compete on that left side, left guard, left tackle. Unfortunately, Tyron has missed some time over the past 4 or 5 years. And so, we obviously have to take a look at that with his age and, just the track record of him missing some games year in and year out. So, but we do feel like one of the reasons that we really wanted him was his versatility and the upside to go out and play that left tackle versus maybe taking a couple of guys who were more center-only type guys, and just made that call that we felt it was best for our organization to go in that direction.
It's already been 6 years since you got Ezekiel Elliott in round 1 of the draft and Dak Prescott round 4 that same year. Elliott's in the last guaranteed year of his second contract, and some would say if this money wasn't guaranteed, he wouldn't be on the team at all and definitely won't be next year. What do you say to that speculation?
I just think that's all it is speculation. I mean, Zeke Elliott is one of the more competitive guys I've ever seen come through the doors of our organization. He's a top-notch competitor. Obviously, being a running back in our league, you're going to take hits. And certainly he's had his share of them. But at the same time, everything, we'll evaluate this, evaluate him this year, but feel great that things are shaping up for him. He's having a great off season and shaping up to have a great year. And we'll certainly, make any decisions that we have to make on players after we evaluate next season. And but we feel fortunate to have Zeke on our team. We feel like it's setting up for him to have a great year. We're obviously putting some work into our offensive line there, and feel like we'll go out there and really put together a group. We think we probably could do a better job running the football more, and certainly that's what we'll be looking at.
The schedule comes out on May 12, and I've worked with NBC long enough to know that the networks generally, when the schedule comes out, want to see how many Cowboys games they have because they'd all like to have as many as they can get. When the schedule comes out for you, what's the first thing you look at?
Usually what I look at is just to see where we've got, where the tough parts are, where we have to go on the road 3 weeks. If there's a stint where we have to go on the road 3 weeks in a row, which you hope to avoid. Certainly you can't help yourself. You look at where your primetime games are. Our season, because we know every year we're going to be playing on Thanksgiving, you look to see how that sets up. I do, in terms of what you're doing before that week, after that week, and then, of course, where your bye sits are some of the highlights of what I look for in terms of a schedule when I get my hands on it.
Well, it's always one of the highlights to see the Cowboys play, and it's a highlight to get a chance to talk to one of the guys who's been running the Cowboys for all these years. Steven, congratulations on your success. Appreciate some of your time. All the best for the rest of the offseason. We hope to talk again soon.
Appreciate it. Enjoyed it. Take care.
Thank you, Steven.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.